What do Bose, Chrysler, and Capital One have in common? They all have had an innovative leader who has helped bring their products to market. This is Chris Rader from Centercode, and today I'm joined by Maurice Leacock. Maurice has had an amazing career, bringing great tech to market like robot vacuums, headphones, fitness scales, a bunch of interesting products that I can spend way too much time covering. In this episode of Launch with Confidence, Maurice shares his insights on frameworks and processes.
Those frameworks are guides for the most part. They give you a way of approaching a solution or a way of understanding a problem, but they should never be the absolute measure by which the product management's work quality is evaluated.
We chat about whether or not passion is a good motivator for a product manager.
Because I think that gregariousness, that passion shows through and equates to you must really care about the thing that you're doing. You must really care about the outcomes that are going to happen. And I think too often it ends up perhaps shortchanging people who may not be as expressive, but are still equally passionate about the quality of the work that they do and the outcome. So,
and thoughts on beta testing from a leader's perspective.
As when we were doing a lot of studies with beta in all of the different industries I've been in, there have been nuggets of information that come back that really make you think about the value proposition that you put out there.
Let's get into it. Hey everybody, Chris here. Thank you for joining the Launch with Confidence podcast. Today I'm joined by Maurice Leacock. Maurice, it's great to have you on.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So first up, we got to talking a couple weeks ago, and I've been following you on LinkedIn, and got a lot of great insights from you. The one thing that I was really interested in your take on was frameworks. Now, we have a lot of frameworks in product management, from launching products to collecting feedback to road mapping. We have all these frameworks for everything, and they're a good way to get a systematic approach to doing something. But as a veteran product manager, what are your thoughts on frameworks, and particularly the whether or not it's a suitable measurement for the effectiveness of a product manager?
That's a great question. That's it's got some factions associated with it. Some folks are really, really wedded to frameworks, and others kind of feel that they are perhaps more of a hindrance than a help. And I'm going to try to, appeal to both of those sensibilities. I think that in many cases, frameworks are a great way to structure thinking and to structure process, the way that things would be systematized so that they can be repeatable and that they can be passed on as folks mature and you bring in new folks to the organization. You can kind of give them a rubric for how things can get done. That said, having an engineering background, I come from a kind of a heritage of folks who you're taught many ways and methods to do work. So in engineering, for example, you're taught how to design or how to do analysis. And those are frameworks in and of themselves, but anybody who builds a level of experience realizes that they need to pull elements from each and every framework that they've learned to meet their style, to meet their approach, and for them to be successful. So you would never expect an engineer to come through with a framework and never augment it for their own needs. Similarly, a product manager should be well equipped to know what works for them and what doesn't work for them. And so I think that I'm a little bit reticent to want to use a framework as a judgment tool. In other words, figuring out whether someone has good judgment or is a good product manager wholesale. It is a way, again, to kind of evaluate whether someone has systematized the way that they think or structured it in a way that they can deliver repeatable results. But I think it needs to be understood that those frameworks are guides for the most part. They give you a way of approaching a solution or a way of understanding a problem, but they should never be the absolute measure by which the product management's work quality is evaluated, I don't believe.
Yeah, definitely. No, I completely agree. For some reason, I didn't think about this before, but I coach girls softball. So I coach my girls team, and there are girls that I get to coach that need fundamentals. They need some of the fundamentals. They need the basic framework in order how to field a ground ball. But then there's girls that have been there for 8 to 10 years, that have been playing a long time, that have already gotten through those fundamentals, and they've started tweaking the way the fundamentals work because of their play style, because of their strengths and some of their weaknesses. So I think that applies to product and actually probably most business roles as well. What do you think about that?
That's exactly right. I think that as you look at every single competency, I'll pick design for example. So design leaders, design practitioners are ideally among the best cohort of friends that a product manager has. Right, product and design should work very closely together when they can, because both complement each other extremely well in delivering excellent experiences and products. And designers can tell you all of the different things they've learned in terms of how to approach and systematize the design process, right? But again, what makes great designers really great is that they put their spirit and their personality and their uniqueness into modifying all of those different frameworks and all those different fundamentals to make something really great that is unique for them. You would never expect them to apply those frameworks note by note, letter by letter, because you would get homogenized results every single time. And that's what makes the uniqueness of design work. So I don't know why it would be different for product or softball or anything else.
Yeah, interesting note on that. So you pick designer, and say they have some frameworks for design, and but maybe you don't have a background in research as a product manager, and you got to go do some discovery. So you may not have that strength. It may be a weakness, and you start off with something that's like a basic framework. In order to get that done, you can modify continuous discovery or find ways to do research. But maybe your competency is in engineering, and you have a background in understanding in that. And then it's like you have almost like equalizers of frameworks, right? Like you find things that you're very competent in, and you can modify frameworks to add a context. Whereas if you're not very confident or competent in some areas, you might say, okay, I'm going to lean more on the framework here to get the work done. So that's a very smart approach. So I really appreciate that. The next question I had, and because frameworks, not everyone is super passionate about frameworks, but some of us can be. I've got a few of my frameworks myself. But the idea that a, a passionate person, someone's passionate about what they're doing, may produce um, better quality or be more productive in a certain area, specifically like product management. So, how do you feel that passion fits in to product management?
Okay, this is a tough one. Not tough to answer, but it really I go back, and it's not a hedge by any means, but I go back to kind of understanding what is meant by passion in some cases, right? Because I think that depending on your cultural context, passion is a super positive thing or it's a super negative thing, right? In some cultures, showing more passion for anything seems somewhat aggressive, or it seems a little bit too overt. I'm thinking about my travels to places like Japan or Korea, or even some parts of Europe where there's not a lot of passion that's explicit in terms of regular business interactions. But those same individuals that have been super successful in their own right in their own environments might be perceived as less engaged, less passionate if they're kind of evaluated on what we might think of as like a scale here over in North America, right? Because I think that gregariousness, that passion shows through and equates to, you must really care about the thing that you're doing. You must really care about the outcomes that are going to happen. And I think too often it ends up perhaps shortchanging people who may not be as expressive, but are still equally passionate about the quality of the work that they do and the outcome. So you see, I've actually bounced between the two or three different definitions of passion there, right? Because passion can be emotion. Passion can be my belief that my work output needs to be of high quality. So I'm very, very much committed to that, right? Passion might be that I really want to see the right thing being done by the organization, and it melds really well with my integrity and my personal stance on things, right? So I think it really does mean a few things to different folks. We want to maybe perhaps isolate it to, you care about the work that you're doing, you care about the work product, you care about the outcomes, you care about the value it drives for the organization. If that's where we're thinking about passion, then by all means, I think it's super important for someone working in the product competency to really be aware and an advocate for how they represent the interests of their competency, their product initiative, their company's well-being, And that representation, I think, is something that needs to be table stakes, right? The fact that you are engaged and, um, again, thinking about the well-being of your team, how the process works together, so the quality of the relationships that are happening. I think that's where some of the passion is most well applied, right? If, on the other hand, that passion ends up being something that's super aggressive or perhaps even demeaning of others, then I wouldn't advocate for that. I wouldn't say that you should be, fully assertive and pushing back on folks just for the sake of showing your passion. I think it does have to be applied in a thoughtful way. Again, given what those specific principles for your company's success and for your group success are. If that
Yeah,
makes
no,
sense.
that's brilliant in my head because you got me thinking so much about the concept. Because I say passion. I have me personally. I have a driving force. I want people to do better. I want products to be better. That's something I hold to myself. It's something I hold to my family. It's something I'm always kind of striving for. And I call that passion. It gives me a driving force. It's motivating, and because of that motivation, I get a certain level of output. Like I get output from that drive, but that might not be what we're thinking about. Why would we want someone? In my definition of that's passionate, it's to get a better quality or a certain level of output and energy. Like that's what I want, and it may not be the term even passion that we're using, because passion can be, like you said, it could be very emotionally driven, right? Like, oh, they're just passionate. I joke around about
Yes.
that with some people. They're just passionate. They're just
Yeah.
loud.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's very, very. It's got me thinking so much of like, okay, so if we're not looking at something like, say, passion in a traditional sense, because there's so many cultural influences on that term, what is it that we would be looking for as a product manager? What what driving force do we want from product managers? Or, for example, which ones do you have that lead you into a company, that get you into a product line, and make sure that that thing is the best possible product that you can provide or put out there?
Yeah. So I think of this one. I love this question. I think of this one as probably I'm a sci-fi buff, so there's always a thought about, like, if you didn't exist as a person, if you were absent from this reality, how would the existence be different, right? So in other words, like, I think of my lineage, my parents, grandparents, right? So everybody made an impact in each other's lives. You meet your friends, you meet your spouse, your partner, you make an impact in their lives, and vice versa. But there's always the thought about what might have happened if those two people didn't meet, or you didn't meet that person, or you didn't meet your team, right? So at the very least, the person who's in a product role should have an influence, and some might even think an outsized influence, in how the company or the team, the company, the world, the customer perceives the work product or the output or the thing that company makes, right? So product or service doesn't matter. If that thing that is the output, the work product, influences people's lives, hopefully in a positive way, then as a product manager, you should be able to draw a direct line to that perception, that influence, and your activities, the things that you've done to make sure that it isn't just another product that's released that doesn't get any notoriety, or not. It's not even about notoriety. I should take that back. It's really more about, did it make a difference? Did it actually make a difference in this person's life? And I mean, it doesn't have to be the most fantastic product. It's not necessarily a phone or a tablet computer or any of the really high level technology products. Let's say it's a soda straw, right? I mean, does that straw make a difference in that person's life because it's accessible to them? It doesn't just, it's not made of a paper that degrades when you stick it inside the liquid that you're going to use it for. It has a better environmental impact if those things are important to you. But if that product itself made an impact in someone's life, that they went out of their way to choose that thing and say, this is actually better for me and better for my needs than the other thing I can choose, then I feel you've succeeded as a product manager. So to your question, it's your level of impact that you should be really perhaps measuring product managers on, in terms of, like, does your approach, does the way that you develop relationships and influence without authority, of course, um, persuade people to do things, help people have the right strategic context to make better decisions. All of those things you could perhaps put into a checkbox list and say, are these the things that have allowed you holistically to make sure that the offering that you've created actually does make an impact relative to the other thing? I know that there are going to be products and product managers that think to themselves, well, I'm just making a widget. Like it's another widget like the widget over there. We're doing this to be competitive. It doesn't have to really stand out. But in a matter of speaking, the way that companies make money and become successful is that the thing that you make incrementally has to stand out against something else, right? That's how you gain market share. That's how you build returns for your company, is that the thing that you make is just that much better than the other one, right? At
Hmm.
some point. It's all of a horse race sometimes. Like somebody else's product will come out, the next generation will be slightly better than yours. And again, that competitive spirit, it's like, okay, we now have to kind of catch up, right? Almost every service and product then you can probably put into that category. The best example right now is when you think about how long search has been around, right? For like companies like Google, this is top of mind for me for some reason. You're looking at things like Gemini and Perplexity and Claude, and how those have kind of usurped that search market. People are paying for search essentially, right? Because before it was a free service from Google, but these products have come along and they are demonstrably better at helping you either save time, get to the more accurate results quicker, be more productive. And that again is a product manager's dream. It's like, wait a second, I just somehow accidentally created the thing that is now going to move us into another era of how this should work. So, that's a drastic example of like, this is so much better. But even in the smallest cases where it's only incrementally better, that is again how you succeed. Incrementalism in that context is not a bad thing, right? We all want large steps, of course, but incrementalism means that your product is better than somebody else's.
Yeah, that's great. Wow. No, I love that. So one thing that comes to mind in this situation is, so a lot of times as product managers, we may be given a product, right? Either a CEO has a pet project, or we're picking up someone's version 2.0 or 2.1, and we're having to go back that direction, right? So product manager could have had laid out all that stuff already. Is that here's the impact I have on the world, and here's the good that I'm doing, or and how do you pick that up? Like what advice do you have for a new product manager that's coming into an existing product? It's no longer a new product introduction. It is the next generation of that product, or not next generation, just the next version of that product. How do
Hmm.
you pick up that same impact?
Right. So, I mean, when you think of that, I mean, I have an example in my mind. I'm not going to say it out loud, but I think anybody who knows me will figure this out, right? But I think that, imagine you come into a circumstance where there is a product, probably on its third or fourth generation, but it's not yet perfect. It's a good product. It's perhaps meeting the intent and the spirit of what it was created for, but it can be better because those customers that are passionate about it, ironically, are the ones who are telling you how it can be better. Because when you've actually created something that changes the way people operate and changes their habits, they're going to be the first ones to tell you why it could be better and how it can be better, right? And what they don't like about it, right? Those are the ones you want to definitely hone in on. So that should inspire the spark to think about, wow, if I do care about my customers, I'm going to take it for granted that if you're in that role, you actually care about what those customers are saying or what
Mhm.
those users are saying. And if it is an existing product and your job is to help it be better, then you've got to understand for yourself, well, what does better mean, right? So if better means that we can continue to service these customers with the continued product, keep them within brand, keep them within category, whatever your metric is going to be in terms of what success means, then naturally you're going to feel that again, impact is a key here. It doesn't have to be a brand new product, but the fact that you can take something that is garnering a level of mind share and affinity and loyalty and make it better for other customers to be attracted in the same way, that's a great place to be in, right? So, a lot of folks talk about 0 to 1. It's like, I want to create something brand new that has never existed before. That's wonderful, but it's really hard to do, right? It's really hard to always be successful in 0 to 1 contexts. I would think of a product manager just starting out, especially if you're handed a thing and your job is to make it better or to increase market share or to attract new types of customers into this segment. That's a gift, right? Somebody has already figured out the 0 to 1 part. Having the one and going to 1.52 to 10, yes, people say 10xing is hard, but all I'm saying there is that the thing exists. It's
Mhm.
already in the minds and in the zeitgeist of what people are thinking about, and having the job to make it better, while it's a huge responsibility, is a huge gift.
Yeah. I'm going to zero in on one thing that I hear the customers throughout that. Now, getting it better? Like, what role are customers playing in for the product manager in making that product better?
So two schools of thought, right? So do customers typically know what they want in making something better? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So I think it should never be that you're asking directly for an answer. You're not saying, "Hey, customer user, I need you to tell me what do you need to make this product better." I think that intrinsically, being a product manager often relies upon your ability to human well. And what I mean by that is being able to work with people to understand the underlying motivation, perhaps the real why, as some people call it, right? So why specifically did they get this product? And some of the schools of thoughts in the frameworks, going back to that conversation, are about they buy a product or a service to get a job done, right? Jobs to be done framework, things like that, right? So if you're kind of using that same thesis there in terms of they're buying your product not because it's pretty or it has great design necessarily or that it costs a certain amount, but cost is always a factor. It's because they have a specific thing they need to get it done. You've got a microphone in front of you from Shure. You purchase that microphone probably because it performs really well and it serves the purpose of making sure you sound great in these recordings, right? But that's the job to be done.
Mhm.
So thinking about the role the customer plays is you have to understand what motivates them for those jobs to be done, frankly, right? The core principle of product management, regardless of where you come into it, like you could be a solopreneur or CEO acting as a product person because you're creating a brand new thing. You could be somebody who is working at a massive conglomerate, 50,000 plus people, trying to work on a small piece of software or code for firmware, whatever you need. But there's a job to be done for that thing that you're creating. Again, the output of your work needs to satisfy that job to be done. In the improvement context, typically it's hitting a certain high percentage ideally of the jobs to be done, but it's missing something. It's missing perhaps a few emergent tasks or jobs to be done that have come along once the existing product has been established. It's like, wow, I can do this thing with the product, but there's this new thing that I'd love to do with your product that it does not do. Criteria for improvement. Again, needing to understand, force rank the reasons why that might be important right now versus later. But ultimately, that's another constituent piece of the underlying why they buy the product, why they buy the service, why they come to you as your company providing the thing that gets the job done. So I see it fairly clearly in terms of that improvement criteria. Again, is less about it's less about the thing that they say. It's more about what they do and how they do it.
What what I like about that is it got me to think in a slightly different way. We hear the saying from Ford about the if I would have asked my users, they would ask for faster horses, and I want to take a spin on that with, and we had it in this last podcast episode as well. Um, it's really interesting to know what they're asking for the ones that do think that they know, because it gets you thinking, right? Like obviously they're not there making the decision, like they're, but that's input as a product manager. So if I take that input of like why would they want that, like what could drive that, and I can poke and prod and I can look at a bigger set of data from a larger group of users or customers, or if I'm just talking to markets, I can look at that market and say, okay, let's find out some underlying, like you're
Mm-hmm.
saying, that the true why, like why are they doing that, like not only why are they running the problem, why would they think, and that might be even a positioning thing, why would they think that they need
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah,
Oh, that's great.
yeah,
Let's see. I'd love to hear. Just I'm gonna throw one more on there. So
yeah.
obviously we're at Centercode. We love beta testing. Where do you think beta testing and beta programs, and I'll even throw on dogfooding in there. Like where do you think that fits in terms of that improvement? I know beta is very common in a 0 to 1. You need to test it out before you go out the door. It needs to launch. You need to make sure that you
Yeah.
that launch is great. But in an improving context, how would you be using that feedback at a later stage of that development to make sure that it doesn't go wrong, or like how are you using that?
It's such a powerful tool. I'm not just saying this because I've worked with you all in Centercode before. It's just that it opened my eyes to some of the things that I perhaps even didn't recognize at the early part of my career of just how important beta is, not just to knock out what's happening with the product, right or wrong, but it really also helps you test the value that you're delivering to customers, the value proposition itself, right? So when you think about that, and maybe, just to level set for ourselves, right? So alpha, maybe that internal dog food piece of like, hey, we're going to just feed this around our users here internally, or our constituents internally that are somewhat expert and familiar, to hear what they think about this brand new idea or this improvement. And then to me, beta ends up being that one really brave step where you're like, I'm going to try it out there, right? Away from the friendlies, away from the people who do have the context to be able to be a little bit kinder, right? So beta is where you're really brave enough to let it go and take the spears, take the arrows that are shot back at you, right? But at the same time, what I recognized when we were doing a lot of studies with beta in all of the different industries I've been in, there have been nuggets of information that come back that really make you think about the value proposition that you've put out there. The thing that you believe people will find value in has been so often debunked, because in beta, you're like, oh my gosh, this is not at all the reason people want this product. And you might, much to your delight, discover that it's something much, much more valuable. Yeah, that's happy path. The unhappy path is you find out that your value proposition does not work at all. But you really want to find that out before you spend all the money launching the thing, right? We can go on and on about products that were actually launched that there really wasn't a clear value proposition for, which I would wager you could find out through beta, right? You could find out through that structured and ideally objective beta, where you're going to ask really hard questions about, does this meet your need? Does it fulfill the promise that we perhaps put out there that this product will meet? But I think that's where the gold is, if you will, in terms of how you make things better, frankly, right? Because to me, every single initiative you have, every single product you want to release, everything on your roadmap needs to have an adequate amount of consideration around how you're going to beta test that development, that release, that product launch. You have to do that, because there's nothing truer than real people telling you whether or not your product is hitting the mark, or whether or not it's to its design intent, or whether or not it will make them switch from something else to your product, right? So I can't say enough about it. I think that in too many cases, it gets shortchanged for time, because things are under the gun, and nobody would argue that speed to market isn't important. But I think that so many missteps, perhaps in the product world, can be avoided if there's a considered duration, a considered set of effort that is put around properly beta testing.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'll again zero in on, because you're saying great things. When we talk about positioning tends to be more, I'd say, in the product marketing world of product management, just slightly. It gets a little bit into how we're showing it off, communicating it to the world. And I have a fun story, and I'd love to get your take, see if there's any of the fun stories that you have. I was running a beta test for a smart grill. And we know that connected, smart, means that you can access it from anywhere. And it's a great feature, right? Like you can access it, or you get remote. It's a peace of mind, right? It gives you peace of mind. Also, maybe it's a little bit easier because you can access somewhere. You save yourself time, right? These are very rational and logical reasons for why having something smart would be effective. It's integrated, it's connected. And what I found on the beta test is I had someone say, oh, I love the smart features. I love the fact that I can connect. And in my head, I'm a researcher at heart, on top of being a product manager. And I heard, I'm like, why? I know, like I say all these things, like this is why it's important. Why do you think it's important? Tell me, in this situation, you came in here, you gave us feedback. I want to know really why you think this is important. And I got told in this specific piece of feedback, just one piece of feedback, that the user was a mom. They have a lot of big family dinners. They did them every week, multiple times, and they cook for a very large family. And it gave her an opportunity to spend less time out in the grill. It was a mom that did the grilling, and she got to spend more time inside with the family. So she would get the notifications of when she needed to go check on it, or when the temperature was hit. So she didn't need to have that constant, like, oh, is it ready? Is it where it needs to be? And it's like that was the root. Yes, better, faster, stronger was what we were saying. It's the rational thing, but like we just got to help someone connect with their family a little bit longer than they were before. And they're also producing a good result at the end of it. So a feature on top of the product that helps someone. And to me, that's always one of my go-to stories about maybe marketing and sales should really hear what's
Yep.
going on in inside beta in order to lock in that positioning a little bit more.
Yep. Similar story. I mean, this is such a common thread and theme amongst products, regardless of what they are. I mean, I've worked on headphones, I've worked on robots, of course. I've done a little bit of dabbling into this smart fitness, right? And in every case, there is a reference, or at least a thematic reference to the fact that the product being sold, the product that's being accepted, afford somebody a level of freedom, if you will, in terms of what they're trying to do, right? The one that's most closely related to the story you just told is with robots, of course, right? So I worked at iRobot, and at iRobot, when I first got there, I believe the slogan was, hey, we do the vacuuming for you with the Roomba, or the cleaning for you, so you don't have to, right? And that hews directly towards the I can free up so much time because this robot's cleaning the floor. And then, we found out as we did more work for, ethnographic studies, and just even user research studies, hearing about how people use the product in their home, that it got deeper. It got into why that time is important, because they don't have to. The first order realization is that, yes, I get some time back. But why do I need that time back? Oh, because I feel like I'm always stretched for time, like I'm really super busy. Why do I feel like I'm stretched for time all the time? Well, because now that I've got all these other conveniences in my life, I fill my time with more things to do,
Hmm.
right? And so you kind of get down this track of like, why are these things important? And then you get into some of the other understanding about the psyche of the customer, right? So in iRobot's case, we came across a couple of different personas that really opened our minds to not just about the time savings, but what that time savings intrinsically meant to the person. So we were able to kind of come up with a couple of personas around what we called a neat seeker, right?
Mm.
So somebody who is a neat freak but is looking for a solution. They're seeking a solution. So a neat freak and a solution seeker became a neat seeker, right? And so that person is proud of their home. They invite people over not because they just have, the grill outside or they have the bonfire, but they want you to come in. They want you to see the brand new splash for the kitchen. They want you to see the renovations they did in the living room. And part of that is that it looks neat all the time. It looks clean all the time. But it's
Hmm.
got to be a solution, that solution seeking, where it's like, this can't take a lot of time. Like I can't spend, 3 years learning how to use this robot. It's got to be pretty simple for me to figure out. But remember, I'm a neat freak, so it's got to go through the white glove test. It's got to make sure that it actually cleans the floor properly. So the beauty of a thing like that, when you first unlock it saves me time. It's like you really dig further. It's like, why is that time important? Oh, because I'm throwing a party, right? And
Yeah.
again, this is my motivation for throwing that party.
It's funny. My wife just started making me watch, and I'll say my wife made me do it. Love is Blind.
Yeah,
On Love is Blind, there's one guy, I don't remember his name because I like loosely pay attention. But he talks about having two robot vacuums that are cleaning. And he's saying it keeps my house is immaculate. It's spotless. It's not just because he wants to have, it
yeah,
done. It's part of him and he's pushing that outwards. It's like when you
see,
have an iPhone, it's not just so you can call someone. It's because you want to look like you have an iPhone. You want to
yep,
have that, that about you. I am an
yep.
iPhone user.
But it's so great. Like the brilliance of that is that, like, yeah, that first message is the amalgamation of all those underlying motivations, right? And that's
Yeah.
so great because, yes, with the iPhone example, it's like the fact that those advertisements and the way that they speak about the iPhone, it's never about specs, by the way, right? If
Yeah.
you notice, one of the cool things, you look at those billboards, if you see any outdoor advertising for iPhone or iOS, or not iOS, but any kind of Apple device, for the most part, it's just a beautiful shot, right? And you're like, wow, why does that work? Well, because if my home has that similar aesthetic, then that reflects well on me. Then my life
Mhm.
actually has a very similar. I mean, I'm one of those people who has nice things, and I can afford that, and right. So
Yeah.
it's just amazing how that one specific approach, that image, the way that the image is shot, the few words that are along that image represents like the iceberg of stuff underneath the water that you really, really care about. It's always amazing.
Yeah, and you might not be able to get those insights or use those smart, clever things without that connection to users. If you just shipped a product, threw it out into the world, and you didn't put your ear to the ground at any point in time,
Yep.
you wouldn't have those smarts. You would be just saying specs. You'd just be saying, here's what it is and what you can do with it, not the impact that it can have on somebody.
I always I go back to the designers, right? Because that's where I've kind of learned a lot of the appreciation for how important that connection is, right? Because they're the ones who frankly hear all of those words, hear all of those things people say, and they bring the themes together. Like we of course do that as product people as well, for sure. But they're the ones often in many cases, especially as a baby product manager, you may not have those skills, right? And you hear the way that that synthesis comes together, and to me, it's always awe inspiring. It's like, you got that from all of this, and they're like, yeah, that's what this means, right? And it's like, again, it's just tremendous. It's magic. So
Yeah.
it's great.
All right. All right. Well, I have some lightning round questions that I'd love to get over to you. First one, describe beta in 1 to 3 words.
Knowing the value.
All right. The most challenging thing to do in beta.
Remove the bias. Remove your inherent bias.
Your bias or the user's bias?
Yes, sorry. Removing the existence of inherent bias in both sides, right? So thinking about how your questions might lead to bias, thinking about, or your activities, thinking about how your interpretation can be influenced by bias, right? So kind of trying to be as unbiased in terms of the analysis and the gathering of the data as possible.
Okay. Easiest thing to do in beta.
Doing it, like check done, making sure that you have done it.
Okay. One misconception about beta testing.
That that the fact that somebody already buys a similar product, or that your product is perhaps an iteration of the existing product, means that it's automatically going to be better and different.
All right,
And that
last
you
beta
don't need to
question.
do beta. In other words, yeah.
Oh, that's a good one. You don't need to do beta because this is just a slight variation
Yep.
of the previous one. Though times have changed and products have and problems have evolved, that maybe we don't need to do it now.
Yeah.
All right, last beta question. What's your favorite thing about beta testing?
The unexpected discovery.
Okay. Favorite activity in product management?
Uh, Setting the context and forging a path to understanding.
Okay. Most challenging thing to do in product?
Um, helping the inception happen that this is not a job everybody can do. In other words, trying to make sure people can come to it on their own, that product management is a thing.
Coffee or tea?
T.
Okay. How do you unwind?
Vinyl.
That'll do it. All right. Are you watching anything on TV right now or on the streaming services?
Yes. Watching two series that have a lot to do with quantum physics. One called Constellation, where there's a quantum event that forces an individual from one dimension to end up in another one, and then the adaptation of the three-body problem.
Just saw that one yesterday. What's the best piece of advice you've been given professionally?
That I have been given.
Yeah, that you've been given.
Um, when faced with an insurmountable problem that seems intractable, insoluble, or just somewhat catastrophic, take a step back and identify what things don't matter. Like the example that was given to me is that in the end, most things don't matter. The things that do matter are the ones that, of course, you pay attention to, but it's really a magical scale, a superpower to understand how to divine between the two, which ones do matter, which ones don't.
Great. All right, Maurice, thank you so much for coming on. I've just had a blast, absolute blast, talking with you.
Thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun.